Hey there my friends, welcome to my YouTube channel. Today's project is a hedgehog and I'm working in pastel on pastel matte, that's Clairefontaine pastel matte paper. Now this little project of the hedgehog holds a very dear place in my heart because it's in memory of a little hedgehog we rescued last year and we named him Chester. He was from an autumn litter but unfortunately he passed away. So it's in memory of him that I'm doing this little project today. Okay, so back to the project. It is pastel matte paper by a company called Clairefontaine. The paper itself has a cork-like texture to it, a cork-like quality. It's sort of an in-between velour paper that feels fluffy and the sanded paper that feels like sandpaper. This is in between. It does take a lot of layers and it keeps the brighter colours nice and bright. It doesn't dull down any of the colours when you're working on the white. You can get it in all different colours, but today I'm working on the white. So what I've done is I sketched the hedgehog very roughly on a piece of photocopy paper, just a vague outline really, and just made note of where the eyes and the nose and the ears are, and then I transferred that sketch over onto this piece of paper. Then I masked out the hedgehog with a piece of Frisket masking film, and then I was able to begin to apply pastel and not worry about it going over the areas where the hedgehog is going to be. Although if you do find you have to work without a mask on your subject, even if you go over the edges slightly, it doesn't matter because the pastel that's then used to create the hedgehog will cover up any background details that have overlapped, so that's fine. So the pastel I'm using at the moment are the PanPastels, that's by the company PanPastel, and the tool I'm using is called a soft tool, and I'll have everything linked below in the video description. So at the moment I'm just using 3 different greens. There's a medium green, a light green and a dark green, just to create an out of focus background. So those of you that like photography, a very shallow depth of field that we're looking at here. Just want all the focus in the finished project to be just on the hedgehog's face. So that's what I had in mind. That's what I sketched out. Did a couple of thumbnails, thumbnail sketches, a very, very small sketch, just a few inches sort of square. And you just look for composition within that, so there's no detail and there's just shapes, and I might do a video on thumbnailing ideas. Might be something people are interested in. Let me know in the comments below, and also let me know in the comments below if you'd like to see any particular subject covered or if you'd like any particular medium covered. So moving on, I just went in, like I said, with the 3 green PanPastels, light, medium and dark, and I just threw in a little bit of lilac as well into the background, just to give it a little bit more of a natural feel than all green. I then removed the masking from the hedgehog and then covered the work partially with a piece of glassine paper. Now this glassine paper is also by the company Clairefontaine. I buy it in really big sheets. I think they are 50 centimetres by 70 centimetre sheets, and then I just cut them down to fit the project that I'm working on. I find that's the cheapest way of doing it, and then they're all stored in the boxes that they were delivered in, so they're all stored flat. You could store them upright as long as there's plenty of padding in there to stop the paper getting crinkled. So the idea with glassine paper, I think it used to be called butcher's paper, is that it doesn't pick up anything. So you can lay it across pastel, you can lay it across graphite or charcoal, and you can lean on it while you're working, but it doesn't pick up any of the pigment from off of the paper. So it doesn't smudge any of your work. It's much better than using a normal piece of paper to cover your work and lean on, because if you're using a normal piece of paper, it will at some point pick up pigment, especially if it's pigment that's been heavily laid down onto the paper. Okay, so back to the project. So using the soft tool again, and it's like, it might feel weird using soft tools to begin with. They've got replaceable foam tips, so you use whichever tip shape that you feel is necessary for that part of the project. And then the tools, I think there's 3 or 4 different shaped tools, and you just slot the foam protector onto the tool. You can wash them, or if they wear out, you just replace the foam tool, but not the foam tip, but not the tool. So the tools will last forever, and the foam tips are replaceable. So I'm just using PanPastels again. A PanPastel is pastel pigment compacted down into a little tub. They come across as fairly expensive when you first see the price, but there is a lot of pigment in each tub, and in actual fact it does work out cheaper than buying pastel sticks. So we're just building up a little bit of texture now. Now all I want to do at the moment, all I'm focused on doing at the moment, is going around the hedgehog, building a little bit of form and getting rid of the white paper. Now I could have used a brown tone pastel matte paper here, because I could have let some of the brown show through to help with the coverage of the hedgehog, but that might have dulled down the greens and the lilacs that I used in the background. So just for simplicity in itself, I just went with the white today. The orange tape that is taping the paper down partially, I've first used a normal masking tape, an artist masking tape, to tape the paper to the board, and I've secured it with a little bit of sellotape over the masking tape so it won't affect the acidity of the paper in any way. Then, to ensure that I've got clean edges once the painting is finished, I've just gone around with artists washi tape. That's the orange tape. So in actual fact there's 2 types of masking tape there, a little bit of sellotape as well to hold everything in place. So as you can see, I've gone round the whole of the hedgehog now with a light PanPastel, a little bit of a darker PanPastel. Doesn't matter what colours you use really when you're working on a hedgehog, because it all depends in what light the hedgehog has been photographed in. But just to keep your contrasts visible, continuously working on your contrast so that your lights are lighter and your darks go darker. The more contrast, the more realistic your subjects look. And you can achieve, if it's not actually showing up on your photograph, then take your reference image into an app on your phone or a program on your PC or laptop and just play around with the contrast settings. Keep the original photograph as it is, make a duplicate, mess around with the colours, the contrast, the tones, and see if you can improve your reference image that will then improve your style in your artwork. And obviously this isn't working really realistically, this is working in a stylized style, yeah. But all the techniques remain the same, whether you're working realistically or you're stylizing a piece. So it will be photorealistic because I am working from a photograph, but it'll be a little bit stylized as well. So I've used a little bit of lilac across the nose. Now that's not necessarily in the reference image, but I just wanted to pull in a little bit of the colour from the background into the subject. And I do find I do that in nearly all of my paintings. If there's a purple in the background or a burgundy in the background, I'll pull it into the animal's fur or the animal's face or the bird's feathers or the fish's scales or the reptile's skin, anything like that. I'll bring in the colours from the background into the subject, even if it's only sort of a slight hint of that colour, and it just pulls the picture together and makes it a whole picture, as opposed to making it look like the subject is just sort of cut out and stuck onto the background. I mean, it does look that way at the moment, but I do go in a bit and blur around the edges of the hedgehog and fit him into his scenery a little bit better. So just working on the nose now, popping in a little bit of burgundy. The pencils I worked with on this project are the Caran d'Ache pastel pencils, and I must say now the video isn't sponsored by Caran d'Ache, but I've worked with Caran d'Ache for the past 10 years demonstrating for them, and they did send me the complete set of pastel pencils. I think I've had probably 3 complete sets of them by now because I've worn through them, but they do wear a long time. They do sharpen to a nice point, they do retain the point, but they're very soft and blendable as well, so they're a brilliant all-rounder pencil, pastel pencil. And I do work, I think I work with a few Conti, that's the Conti Pit Pastel pencils as well. I've had for 40 years and they're still going strong. Yeah, I had them for my 14th birthday from my dad. Unfortunately, my dad's no longer with us. He passed away in 2001. So it's lovely working with those and bringing back some lovely memories. Yeah, I'm 54 now. Right. Okay, moving on. So the eyes are in. The eyes are very small in this piece, so I just popped a little bit of burgundy into the eyes, followed by a little bit of black, leaving space for the white, and that really was about it for the eyes. Very simple to do. When you see me go on like that with the fingers, I'm not trying to remove any of the pastel, I'm just pushing it in and slightly blending it with the surrounding colours, that's all. You can use a blending tool for that. You could use a paper blending stump. What you've got to be careful is, or a silicone tool, but yeah, what you've got to be careful is that by doing that, if you use a silicone tool or a blending stump, it does sometimes remove some of the pastel instead of leaving it in situ on the paper where you want it to be. So just keep that in mind. So a little bit more burgundy. The burgundy again isn't in the reference material, but I did want to warm the tones, warm the hues a little bit, take the temperature as it were of the painting up a little bit, so it looks a little bit more warm and friendly. And as I said, this is all done in memory of a little hedgehog, can't even say it. We named Chester. He was very ill when we got him, and he ended up going to a rescue and rehabilitation centre, but he really wasn't a viable baby, which is very sad when we know that hedgehogs in the UK are on the decline. Okay, so we went in with a little bit of cream then, just to get the hairs moving in the right direction on the muzzle. And it's the case of just keep looking at your reference image. I'll put a link in the video description of 2 websites where you can get copyright free reference images from to use in your own work, and that's pixabay.com and unsplash.com. Take a look over there and you can find yourself some lovely reference images to work from, all copyright free. You can use them in your artwork, you can sell your artwork or exhibit it with no worrying about where the reference images came from. So we're just putting a base colour into the ear. Again, the ears are very small. There's not really a lot of detail in there, so I'm just blocking them in. A little bit of burgundy, a little bit of dark brown and a little bit of black. Excuse me. And if you're going to add black to a painting, never add black on its own because it can look very flat. So always go underneath the black with a burgundy or a brown if you want your painting to look warm, or lilacs and purples and some reds if you want your painting to look cool. So that's something to keep in mind when working on projects of your own. Just using sort of a taupe colour there, cinnamon taupe, can't remember what it's called now. The colours don't matter as much as the contrast. Keep the contrast in mind, and the colours as near to natural as you can. If a natural look is what you're going for. If something really stylized you're looking for, and you want to make I don't know, a purple hedgehog or a blue hedgehog, something like that, then by all means go along those lines with your colours, but keep your contrast sets at quite higher level, and the contrast is going to catch people's eye and make them want to look at your work more than colour. Okay, unless it's something, you know, like a peacock, then you've got to have the colours in there, the iridescent blues and greens. Now what I've done is I just wanted to show you this, because I know a lot of YouTubers keep their work upright and show you with their hand leaning in from over the top. Now that might be fine for them, but I want to be comfortable when I'm creating my artworks, and I want to show you that there's nothing wrong with turning your artwork round. So here I've got it positioned on its side, and it just makes it so much more comfortable for me to film, because obviously you've got the camera leaning over my left shoulder. And I just want to show you that if you want to turn your artwork round to make it more comfortable for you to do the strokes that need to go on there, then do it. If I'm working and I'm not filming, my artwork is on the side, upside down, the right way round, and I'll keep moving it round to make it more comfortable for me. You're the artist. Position your artwork how you're comfortable working, and your artwork will turn out better for it. If you're comfortable when you're working, it does show in your artwork. It's just like if you're enjoying working on a particular subject, it does show through in the completed artwork. If you're working on a subject that you don't particularly like, that will show through in your artwork as well. So just keep that in mind too. So just adding a little bit of this warm deep red, trying to get some shape into the top of the head where the little spines start. And then gently rubbing, or not even rubbing, gently brushing, I guess, against the texture of the paper. And he's back the right way round now. So I've just put in a few dark marks on the top of those spines, and really that was just mapping it out for me, just so I know where those spines start. I did put some rest of the cream hairs on his face going up towards that crest of spines, popped some whiskers in so I know where they're going to go. I'll go over those whiskers again later on, but just sort of mapping everything out. Now if I wasn't filming, I'd be popping from one part of the painting to another. When you're working on a complete painting, you know, as a whole, you might be working on the subject but then notice something you've missed in the background. Now instead of leaving it and sometimes forgetting about it, what you've just spotted, it's nice to be able to pop back and pop in what you've just noticed you've missed. And here what I've done is I've just gone around the edge of the hedgehog with the taupe colour pastel pencil, and I've just blurred it out. So again, bringing the focus back to the face and pushing the body back away from the viewer again by making it out of focus. Excuse me. Now I'm going in with that was a Derwent. That's a Derwent pastel pencil. So just popping in there with a Derwent pastel pencil and positioning some darks. At the minute, I'm not doing anything with the foreground at all. As you've seen, I've done the background first, then the subject, and the last thing I'll do will be the foreground. Now the reason I don't do the subject first and then the background is because I want the subject to be sitting in front of the background. I want it to be overlapping the background. Some artists do the subject first and then the background, but my preference is to do the other way round. If you do the subject first and then the background, you've then got to come back into the subject and overlap the edges so it's still sitting on top of the background. So, I mean, that's fine if that's how you feel comfortable doing it. I just like to get the background in, get it done, and then concentrate on the subject, because it's the subject, the animal or bird, that I like to work on. I mean, that's my favourite, so I like to get the background done and out of the way, and then enjoy the process of bringing the subject to life. So here I've taken the dark red, and now I'm playing around positioning some of these spines. So what I'm looking for is, I want the face to be the main focus. Then obviously the initial spines that I put in were part of the face as well, you know, part of the main focus. But now, as I'm working away from that central area, these have got to become less and less detailed, so they all blend in and blur out with the rest of the body. I'm doing movements with my hands and you can't even see me. Oh dear. It's a good job this hasn't got a webcam running at the same time. So yeah, so now we're going to put in the little darker ticks. That's a Derwent pastel pencil, and that's the name of that one is Chocolate. It's a really lovely colour. I don't know if that colour's been discontinued now. That's quite an old pastel pencil, but I'm sure you'll be able to get hold of something similar. As I said, the colour isn't important as long as you're going in with a dark. Where you see dark in your reference image is where you put dark in your painting. It's that simple. Just draw what you see and not what you think you can see. Make sure you're working from a reference image that's pleasing to you straight away. Make sure you've got a strong initial drawing down. I have a couple of videos on my YouTube channel explaining how I come up with the initial sketch, and then just work and from your reference image. Keep your eye on your reference image, especially when working with animals. Make sure you're always referring back to your reference image for hair direction and the length of hairs as well, or in this case spine direction and the length of the spines. So putting in some more out of focus colours now. So it's all trickery, isn't it? Art is making the viewer see what's not really there, to be quite honest. I mean, this hedgehog doesn't exist on paper. It's just marks, pencil marks on a piece of paper that's making you see a hedgehog. So you can do so much art, and then the viewer's brain fills in the rest, I believe. So yeah, so we're just making it look like there's more spines going back, little tiny marks, little out of focus marks that enable the viewer to imagine what's there as opposed to what's really there. I hope that makes sense. It's really hard to, I know what I see. I see marks on a piece of paper, and obviously I know what I want the viewer to see, and that is a hedgehog sitting in an out of focus background. So okay, so those darker browns were added, and then I went over with cream flicks on the top of each one, and then gently patted the rest of the body out until it went a little bit fuzzy again. So for me, the hedgehog is fine as he is, and I'll move on to the foreground. So back to the PanPastels with the soft tools. Excuse me, just get a drink. Adding a little bit of lilac in there, and it is a darker lilac, more or less the colour that I've added to the face. So it's a little bit of a darker lilac than the lilac that's shown in the background. And again, it's just pulling the hues from the background into the subject matter, just to tie the painting together. I believe this was the lighting slightly different in this shot, so I believe I was filming at night time now. I had to have a different lighting system on in the studio, but it's the same thing, the same materials, just under a different light source. It's the same light source but without the light coming through the window. That's what I meant to say. Oh, I'm waffling today. I need an anti-waffle button, I think. Okay, so I'm now dipping into the lilac PanPastel with the soft tool, and the white, so it's a light lilac and a white, and literally just getting out of focus marks. I'm applying very randomly using the soft tools. Now I'm using the edge of a soft tool, the same colour pastels, dipping it in and tapping it off onto the paper. It's literally that simple. Don't be worried about applying out of focus backgrounds, out of focus foregrounds, because that's it, they're out of focus. You don't have to put any detail in. Put it in nice and randomly. Try, when you're doing anything that's random in artwork, try thinking of something else. Try thinking of, I don't know, a shopping list, a to-do list that you've got, and it just takes your mind off this process of trying to be random. If you try to be random on purpose, it doesn't work. Lines can end up looking like rows of soldiers, especially if you're doing hair on an animal. You can end up being random but in a pattern, and it just looks wrong. So try thinking about something else, relax and have some fun, and you can practice on another piece of paper if that helps. Now I'm just using the point of the pastel applicator. I'm showing you there, sort of a yellow and a cream, tapping between the two. So again, it's random. Whatever is going onto that pad is mixing in a random fashion. I'm not doing anything deliberately there except going between the two colours, so that when I apply it to the paper, I don't know if there's going to be more yellow or less yellow, more cream, less cream. It's going to be random, so it's then again random onto the paper. Placing the tip colours onto the paper, try not to try and fill every single space. Again, this needs to be random, so just randomly spot it around the front of the foreground, leaving, you know, whatever's nearest to the viewer still blurred. And really that's about it for today. So I've signed it using a colour that was used in the painting itself. Remove the tape. If you're having problems removing any masking tape or washi tape, just heat it with a hairdryer first and it will come off. And there we have it. In memory of Chester, bless him. A simple hedgehog in pastel on pastel matte paper. I hope you've enjoyed today's waffling video. I hope you've learnt something. I hope you give pastels a try. If you haven't hit like, then I'd really appreciate it. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I'd really appreciate that too. Okay, now I'm off to work on my next video, which is Inktense. That's a water-soluble ink, and it's going to be a fish in Inktense. Okay, so I'll see you soon. Take care, everybody. Stay safe and have a nice weekend. It's Saturday today. Yes, glass of wine tonight. Stay safe, everybody. Take care, and I'll see you soon. Bye bye for now. Today I'm going to be working with PanPastels and pastel pencils on pastel matte paper. The paper I'm using is by a company called Clairefontaine, and I've just cut down a small piece it's around about 9 inches by 6.5 inches. So I've sketched out a rough sketch excuse me, on a different piece of paper, transferred the sketch over onto this piece of paper. I've applied a little bit of PanPastel to the background, taped off the area that I'm going to be working on with acid-free washi tape, and then get started with the PanPastels. So here I'm using a soft tool. It's got a little replaceable foam pad, and they're also by PanPastel. Talk about those quite a lot in my other pastel tutorials if you want to take a look at those. But it's just simply different shaped plastic tools with different shaped foam ends that you pop on. You can take them off. They're interchangeable, replaceable, washable. They don't last an awfully long time, but they last long enough to do several small paintings. Okay, so the main thing is with pastel painting, how I work is I like to apply base coat layers. So the base coat layers are generally sort of 98% of the time build the base coat layers up with soft pastel. Now this can be in the form of PanPastels such as you've got here, or they can be soft pastel sticks like Unison or Dale Rowney. Loads and loads of companies produce soft pastels, so that gives you a rough idea. You build up your base layers and then I apply the detailing on top with pastel pencils. We'll get to that later. Now this is a really long video, it's nearly an hour, so just bear with me or skip forward to the bits that you want to watch. I just wanted to cover quite a lot in this one video, and then I'll do some future videos and break everything down into smaller bite-sized sections. So at the minute it's quite self-explanatory. I'm working from my own reference image. It's an image I photographed a snow leopard in Twycross Zoo, that's in Warwickshire. I believe it was 2010, 2011 when I took this photograph. Okay, so I'm just working with a limited palette. So as you can see, I've just sorted out sort of 5-6 colours there, and I'm just applying them light to dark and dark to light, because you can work both ways with your pastels, but I'm just referring to the reference image I have up on screen next to me. I don't print out any of my reference images, I simply work from what I can see on my screen. So there you go. So it gives you a rough idea. You're not wanting to put any detail in at this stage because it's all going to get covered up. Now for those of you that haven't got or don't want to buy things like soft tools, I've got here a very cheap, I believe it was from the pound shop, a selection of foundation applicators, I guess you'd call them, for makeup. I just want to show you what can be done with these. You don't have to go and buy everything that you see other people using. See what you've got around your home. If you are going to use something that you've already got in your home, make sure you give it a really good wash. Make sure there's no oils in there, no remnants of makeup, or if you're out shopping, just pick a new one up. I would advise you give it a good wash when you get home, because you don't know what products have been used in the manufacture of these tools, and you don't want to be putting anything untoward onto your artwork. So I just wanted to show you that you can apply soft pastels with applications that are generally used, or applicators that are generally used for makeup. So whether that's makeup brushes, makeup sponges, anything like that, just give them a go. Use what you've got in the home. The best art products are the ones you've already got, and the worst thing in the world is to have art products and not be using them. So utilize what you've got at home before you're making new purchases. So as you can see, I've built up the form of the subject. So just by using, as you saw before, there were 5 or 6 PanPastels I was dipping into, just to give me a general feeling of the form of the animal. So what's underneath all that fur, the structure of the head underneath all that fur. Don't forget, all of this base coat will be covered up with the detailing of the fur, but not completely. So it's going to look like a mesh. You're going to have your top layers of hairs with like a mesh, where you can see all of the base coat underneath. So the darks and the lights need to go into the correct areas at this point, because that will show through to the finished piece. You'll see, I'm not doing a very good job at describing it at the moment, but you'll see as the painting takes shape exactly what I mean. So the base coats are just as important as the final coats that you do with your pastel pencils or paintbrush or whatever medium you're working in. I'm completely self-taught, so in all the mediums I work in, I generally work the same way, unless it's something where I can't put lighter colours over dark, such as coloured pencil would be a bit tricky. So I work that dark to light to dark instead of dark to light. But with pastels, oils, acrylics. You can work both ways. You can work dark to light and light to dark. And don't forget, there's nothing that you can do that you can't put right. So don't be frightened of making mistakes or anything like that. It's always a learning process. Every single painting you'll ever do is a learning process. You're going to learn something from everything you do. And that's the same for me, and that's the same for everybody else who's creating artworks. So still working on form, looking carefully at my reference image to see where the lights are, where the darks are. You can blur your image if that helps, blur your reference image, or squint just to get that blurry effect. Try and look past the detailing at this point. Don't focus on the detailing of your reference image, focus on the lights and the darks. Try and find out where your mid-tones are. And really, this base coat is all of the mid-tones. So it's the darker mid-tones and the lighter mid-tones. I'm not going on with real darks because that will come in later in the painting. Not going on with the lightest areas because, again, that will come on later in the painting. So once you're happy with your base coat, and the form of the animal or subject, whatever you're working on, looks as though it is what it's supposed to be. I mean, you can tell pretty much that this is a mammal. It looks furry, looks warm. And the basic shape is there. So even to somebody who didn't know what you're working on, they'd pretty much guess you're working on a big furry mammal. So happy with that. You've got the shape correct. So you move on to the next layer as such. This is just how I work. I want you to take the techniques that I'm trying to explain to you and try and apply them to the subjects you're working on. All of my works on YouTube are copyrighted to myself unless I specify otherwise, because they will be sold in galleries, etc. I will be making prints from them. But the idea is for you to learn techniques from me that you can then apply in your own works. So this one, I'm now just redefining the shape of the eyes, because things like this can so easily be lost when working with a soft medium like soft pastel. It's quite easy to lose your guidelines, and the eyes have got to be right. Now sometimes I'll do the eyes first and then go in with these soft pastels, but then you've got a tendency that you might have to go into the eyes again and reapply them to get the shape back if you've lost it. So this way is a little bit easier, a little bit quicker. There was about, I would say, about 4.5 to 5 hours overall of footage that I'd filmed, but that included the sketch and things like that. So I've narrowed it down, so we've got about an hour going on today, and it just slims everything down, makes it easier viewing for you, and hopefully I won't lose my voice halfway through, although maybe some of you are wishing that I did, but hey ho. Okay, so we've gone on with a dark pencil. These are Caran d'Ache pastel pencils that I'm using at the moment, and they're really soft, very blendable. They do retain a point, and I do use them during the majority of this painting. I will be using other pencils too. So I'll just quickly run through the supplies at the moment. We've got Clairefontaine pastel matte paper. We've got an acid-free washi tape. We've got the PanPastels and the soft tools. Then we're going to be using the pastel pencils, Caran d'Ache, Carbothello, Derwent, Faber-Castell and Daler Rowney. They're just some of the ones I'll be using today. Whatever you've got at home, use what you've got. They all do the same job. Some of it's just a little bit easier with some and a little bit harder with others, but they'll all do the same job. So with the eyes, I try and imagine that it's not a flat surface anymore. It has to look orbital, it has to look round. Now a good way of practicing eyes is to draw apples, oranges, cherries, grapes, anything like that. Obviously you've not got, well, I don't know many people that would have eyes lying around the home. So if you want to practice eyes, practice drawing things like grapes and cherries, because it gets the shadowing in the right place, highlights in the right place, and it's the right shape. So we need to be thinking all the time that the eye isn't just the part we see, but it actually goes back into the skull. It's a complete sphere, and we need to get that feeling. Now, the way to do it, even if it's not on a reference image, is I generally, 9 times out of 10, go around the edges with a darker colour. Now, if the animal is looking directly into sunlight, for instance, on the photograph there won't be any darker edges around the edge of the eye, and it looks great, it looks perfect on a photograph, but if you were to replicate that in a painting, it doesn't look too good. It looks false. Even though it's correct to the photograph, it still doesn't look right in the painting. So that way you use a little bit of artistic license, and I generally pop in a few darks around the edges, again to make the eye look round. Your reference image is always only a guideline. I don't know anybody that would ever create a painting and then have it hanging next to the reference image. So the reference image is for you, just to give you guidelines to create your piece of artwork from, so it doesn't have to be exact. This big cat, this snow leopard I was recreating, I did alter his eye colour slightly. I didn't alter the position of the eyes, because that's something you really don't want to mess around with, or the position of the nose or the mouth or anything like that. But coloration in animals, unless you're doing a commission for somebody, coloration can be played around with. If you wanted your big cat or your dog or whatever to have a slightly different hue in the colour of their eyes, then go for it. Just practice it on a scrap piece of paper to make sure the colours go well together, and then feel free to play on your projects and do them how you want to do them. It's your work of art. This is my work of art, and already exists. Obviously, that's why I don't encourage people to copy other people's paintings, even in a tutorial, because my art already exists. I want you to be able to create your art, use my techniques, but to create your art and to enhance your style. If you're forever copying somebody else's tutorials, you'll find it very, very difficult to develop a style of your own, because you'll be sort of anchored on that other artist's style instead of free reigning a little bit. So even as a beginner, I would always suggest that people come up with their own ideas of what they want to do. And when I've taught in person, my students, I would encourage them to come up with ideas that, what do you want to create? What do you like doing? What do you enjoy drawing? What do you see in the world around you? And then just pull little ideas out of that and enable them to be creative themselves. Anyway, back to the eyes. So building up layers and layers. YouTube, with all of the videos that are on YouTube, and there are 9 times out of 10 they're all sped up, gives people a really, really false idea of how long these projects take. As I said, there was a 5.5, I guess, even hours, and I've sort of clipped it and snipped it and shortened it down to an hour for you today. So just take your time. Whatever you're working on, don't rush it. If it's worth doing, it's worth doing well. And if we rush, that's when we make mistakes. So, and although mistakes are sometimes a good thing, because it's a learning tool, it's a tool just like anything else, because you learn to correct things that you're not happy with, you don't want to be making them all the while. And another thing, all paintings go through the ugly stage. So yeah, just if your painting or drawing looks ugly, it's not finished. So yeah, and always keep photographs of your old work as well, or keep your old work. I see a lot of people, and they throw pieces away because they're not happy with them. But it's nice actually just to keep your old works, and then if you're having a bit of a dull day and your works aren't turning out the way you want them to, take a look back at the work you did last year or the year before last, or even last month, and hopefully you should see some improvement. I've not known anybody to get worse. People do progress. It's just that some people progress quicker than others, but we all progress. So stay with it. Don't throw anything away. Keep a photographic record of your works, and you'll see that you're improving with every single drawing, every single painting, every single doodle. Just keep going. Don't give up. Okay, so I added the darks to begin with, and then I've added some greens, just 2 shades of green and a yellow ochre. And now I'm going in with the Caran d'Ache pencils again. They're lovely and soft, very blendable. They're quite expensive, but they are worth it. They last a long time. And I'm just deepening the colours round the edges and then blending them out as they come towards the centre of the eye where the pupil is. And these colours weren't in my reference image, so I'll just let you know that. The reference image of this snow leopard, his eyes were just sort of quite a plain bluey green, sort of an aqua colour, but there was no darkening around the edges at all because he was looking out the window straight at me and my friend Dawn. So all of this is artistic license. That was a big sigh. I didn't mean to sigh then. I'll just have a drink. So darkening again, pushing that eye. You want to imagine that eye just goes and slips underneath the eyelids. It's got to look round. If anything, in a portrait, the eyes have got to be right because they are the things that people focus on. If you look at a photograph of somebody or a photograph of an animal, the eyes are generally the thing that you're drawn to, the thing that you look at. They do need to be right. If they're positioned wrong, or you've got one pupil up and one pupil a little bit down, it's noticeable straight away. So you do need to get those eyes spot on. So a little bit of a different camera angle for you now, using my iPhone to do a little bit of filming. And I just want to show you here that I am working the pastel pencil in tiny circles because it's sped up. It's running at 150% at the minute. It's hard to see from the other angle, so I thought I'd film from this angle and show you how I'm working in tiny circles and blending in towards the middle of the eye. Another thing is, I've seen some artists on YouTube that work one eye, then they complete one eye, and then they'll start on the other eye. I generally don't do that. The simple reason is I like to build both eyes up at the same time. Because knowing me, because I get a little bit sidetracked, as you can imagine. I'm listening to podcasts and things while I'm working, or I've got YouTube playing in the background or something. And I think I'd forget which colours I was using. So, because there's always an array of pencils around me. So I do like to work both eyes at the same time, building up the layers at the same time. One thing, sometimes your subject matter might have different lighting on each eye. So there might be a shadow cast across one half of the subject's face. Now in that case, one eye will be a different colour to the other eye, and these are the things you must keep in mind. That's why I do repeat myself when I say you must always pay attention to everything about your reference image, from the initial pose that you sketch. You know, something catches your eye when you're looking through your reference images, and it might be just a pose. Just keep in mind all the time to try and be as true as you can to your reference image, unless you're quite, what's the word? Not knowledgeable. If you know what you're doing, then you can alter shadows and things. But that is all dependent on where your light source is coming from. So, and confident, that's the word. So unless you're really, really confident and you really know what you're doing, I wouldn't suggest that you go in and start altering where shadows lie. Now, if there is a shadow laying across, half or a quarter of your subject's face, just go with it. because if you remove a shadow or add a shadow, it alters a lot. It really does. And in the case of just a portrait of your subject's face, you know, that's a big deal. So keep in mind your reference image at all times. Keep referring to it. Keep the colours in tune with what you've got on your reference image, and you'll be happy and relaxed while you're working. Because really, all the hard work is done. I think the hard work to begin with is getting that sketch down. I mean, it's an enjoyable process, but getting the composition correct, and things like that. I think that's the hard bit. This is just technique. Once you've learnt technique, this can be the relaxing part. Excuse me. So working the darks again. The underneath of the eyelashes were dark in the reference image, so that helps make the eyes pop a little bit more. And I've added some highlights as well. Now when adding highlights to eyes, if your photograph was taken with a flash on a camera, there'll be like a pinpoint of white light. Now I don't suggest ever using that in your paintings. The simple reason is all it denotes is that the original photograph was taken with a flash on. So try to omit that, and if you're unsure about adding highlights, or you know, if you've got a reference image and all the highlight in the eye is that pinpoint of white where a flash has gone off, if you omit that and you don't know what to put in its place, then I suggest just doing a quick Google search of eyes, or go on two websites that I recommend, pixabay.com and unsplash.com, and on both of those websites there are hundreds and hundreds of copyright free reference images that you can use for your own artworks. Go on there, look for some, say, mammal eyes or bird eyes, whatever it is you're working on your own project, and look at natural highlights where the animal is outside and it might have the sky reflected in their eyes, or foliage might be reflected in their eyes. Look for things like that, and then replace a pinpoint highlight that's been caused by a camera flash with a more natural looking highlight, and it really does add life. It adds a freshness to paintings. It stops them looking man-made, I guess. So moving on from the eyes, we've got all the darks in, we've popped a few lights in, everything's blended out quite smoothly. Don't forget, you can keep popping back if you're working on your subject, on your project, and you see something you didn't spot straight away, you can go in and alter it. But for now, move on. So the next thing I'm doing now, I'm popping in some darks. So no detailing yet. When I put the base coat down, I should have gone darker. Now, as you work a painting from a white sheet of paper or a beige sheet or grey sheet, whatever colour paper you're working on, the idea is to build what I call a tonal map. So you're building up your base coats, you're getting the mid-ranges in with your base coats. So you're not going to your darkest darks, you're not going to your lightest lights, but you're trying to get all the medium colours in, the medium tones in. And as I work the eyes in, and especially with those really darks surrounding the eyes, I realised that the darks in my base coat weren't quite dark enough. So I'm darkening them up with a pastel pencil. It's a Caran d'Ache, so nice and soft, laying on its side excuse me, and just letting the pastel pigment glide across the paper, catching the tooth of the paper and just darkening the areas slightly. So I'm not colouring and not filling in the tooth of the paper at all, just very, very gently darkening the areas that I want to be darker. But again, not going too dark because we don't want any dark areas. We don't want to be struggling when applying our lighter coloured details over the top. So always be aware of just what your mediums can do. Before you start on a project, I hadn't used to swatch my art materials, but during the past year or so I swatch everything now. I swatch all my coloured pencils, my paints, everything, so I know exactly what that medium can do. If I haven't, because I use quite a few mediums, and if I haven't used a medium for a while, you know, you get that bit of a rusty feeling when you get a different medium out that you've not used for a while, even though I've been creating artwork since I was 4 and I'm now 54. You know, if I'm working with pastels or coloured pencils and I've not used, say, acrylics for months, then it's just nice to get back into the swing of things by getting my swatch sheet out, seeing which colours do what, you know, which ones are more opaque, etc., which ones are better for glazing, and it just gives me sort of a boost before I start my next painting. And so just do that with your pastels if you haven't, and it just lets you know what can be achieved with what products. And obviously achievements differ between different brands as well, so what a white pastel pencil might do in one brand might not be the same as what a white pastel pencil can do in another brand, because some are going to be more opaque, some are going to be softer, some you'll be able to sharpen to a fine point, do detailing, some you won't. So here I've just applied a little bit of rusty red to the nose area, and I'm blending it out with a silicone tool. This one is by Royal Sovereign. It's a Royal Sovereign silicone colour shaper. If you don't need these are just tools I've had for, I don't know, 15 years or whatever. You can use makeup brushes, eyeliner brushes, anything, just something small. You can, if the area's not too small, you can use a cotton bud, you know, you just, or your little finger, anything. It's just I had these at hand to the side of me, so I just grabbed one, picked it up and blended it in, but I didn't really need to. And yeah, just if you've not got oodles and oodles of art materials, you know, don't feel as though you've got to go out and buy everything. You haven't. Just get the most out of what you've got already before you start spending your well-earned money to buy products that you might not need. You know, utilize what you've got already, and then if you are going to buy products, research them first, read reviews, things like that. Make sure it's something you're going to be using. Make sure it's you're buying something that adds to what you've already got. You know, you don't want to buy something that's going to detract from the supplies you've already got. Make sure everything you buy is going to be a useful addition to the supplies you've already got, because the worst thing is to buy a new product and then for your old product to be defunct and just sitting there doing nothing, because then that's wasted money and wasted art products. You know, art products that are wasted aren't ones that are used and you make mistakes with. They're the ones that aren't used, they're the wasted art products. So just keep that in mind too, because we've all been there and all done that. You know, somebody reviews something really new and you think, oh, I'd love that, but you don't want to buy it and then not use what you've already got. So yeah, utilize what you've already got. If you've got a cheaper brand of product, say paint or pencil or, you know, pastel pencil or whatever, and you want to start buying sort of the next grade up, use what you've got, and then that, as that supply runs out, replace it with the better one. So you're still using what you've already got, but you're replacing with a better brand. Okay, so the mouth is in, the nose is in. I've resketched the whisker marks in, just adding a little, my hair floating into frame there. Adding a few highlights to the nose. The nose was really simple, just a red undercoat, burgundy undercoat, dark browns and blacks. Time to start some detailing. So I've come down to the chin just to get a feel for the layering for you, and it's all going to be worked the same pretty much over the face, but the chin had got some relative dark patches in, so I'll add those first. And the pencil I'm using, I'm just trying to see, I do believe it's a Faber-Castell pencil, so these are a little bit harder than the Caran d'Ache pencils. They still lay down pigment beautifully, but they will retain a sharper point for longer. So they are blendable just like all the other pastel pencils, but they are a little bit harder. And again, I'm working on pastel matte paper. That's Clairefontaine pastel matte. It's not like sanded paper, and it's not like velour paper. Velour paper, if you've ever felt that, it feels furry, quite fluffy paper. It's got a very deep tooth. Sanded paper feels like, yep, sandpaper. But this one, this Clairefontaine pastel matte, feels like cork. I think that's the closest I can think of a material that feels like this. It feels like cork. So when you feel it, it doesn't feel like it will hold a lot of layers, but it does. It's really wonderful paper to work with. And the paper that I'm leaning on again is the Clairefontaine. It's a glassine paper, but I think Clairefontaine calls it crystal paper. And it just protects your work against the oils in your hands. It stops you, wiping your hand across your work and smudging it. So I'm going on with a Derwent pencil there it's like a brown ochre. And now this is a Carbothello pencil that I've sharpened with a knife and sandpaper, and just beginning to apply some detail. Now, as a lighter colour goes across a darker pigment, you will pick up some of the darker pigment. So all I'm doing is wiping it off on a tissue. That's all. So I'm just removing any dark pigment it might have picked up, wiping it off on the tissue, and then I can go back on. And this is definitely a rinse and repeat kind of way of working. It's very therapeutic if you've got a nice big mug of coffee or a glass of wine or some music playing or a podcast on. It's relaxing because the hard work's been done. The composition's done, the sketching is done, everything's where it should be. The base coat's applied so you can see the structure of the head. The eyes are in, so if the eyes go wrong, generally, things get put on hold and either restarted or completely reworked. So yeah, and the nose is in place. So yeah, now it's just technique, building up the fur. So went in with the dark brown first, popped some guidelines in. Then we went in with sort of an ochre, brown ochre colour, and now we're going in with this cream. Whites we leave right to the very end. So less is more when it comes to white. Because snow leopards, everybody thinks they're going to be white and because they live in the snow, but they're not. They're generally speaking fawns and greys in the coat. Lots of different fawn colours, lots of different grey colours. And again, it all depends on what lighting they're under. So a quick movement of the board so it's easier for me. Now I want the edges, again this is artistic license, it wasn't in my reference photo. I want the edges of the snow leopard's head to sort of fade into the background. I want them to be out of focus because I want the focus to be on the subject's eyes, really. On the middle, the central portion of the face. So all I'm doing is I'm breaking up the outline. So I've not sharpened this pastel pencil too sharp because I don't want any fine detailed lines in going around the edges. Again, this is a Caran d'Ache pastel pencil that I'm using, so they're quite soft, very blendable. And don't forget, if you're working over a background that's darker in colour, you You might pick up a little bit of that pigment, so don't forget to wipe the darker pigment off on a tissue or on a scratch piece of paper that you've got next to you, or on your t-shirt or your jeans, however you want to work. Going in with a Carbothello pastel pencil here, sort of a yellow ochre colour, and I'm gliding the side of this pastel pencil across the surface of the cream pastel pencil that I've just applied, and this is called glazing, and you'll do this in oils as well, and watercolours and acrylics, and it's just tinting a lighter colour with a different colour. So that's all I was doing there. So I've just tinted some of the cream to give it a yellow hue. Now going in with sort of a lemony colour. Again, doesn't matter what colours you use, it's all about your contrast. So as long as I'm not using, you know, reds or purple, although you could use reds and purples, it just looked like the snow leopard was under a different lighting, artificial lighting it would look like, wouldn't it? So we're just going in with different colours, different lighter colours, working dark to light in that area. And the same was done on this lower right hand side. This just building up the creams, a little bit of yellow ochre, popping the markings back in. And now I just want to show you how I concentrate on the shorter hairs, so underneath the eye. So again, as just the same as I worked on the chin, getting a little bit of a dark brown in there, a few guidelines just to help my eyes and my brain concentrate on what I'm doing and where I'm doing it. So always looking at the reference image. I know I talk about that a lot, but it is really, really important, not only for the direction of the hair, but the length of the hair as well. So at this point I'd be looking for where the darkest areas in this part of the hair are, where the longest hairs are, where the shortest hairs are, and the direction. Now going back now with a Caran d'Ache pastel pencil, I've sharpened it with a knife, taken some of the wood off with a knife, sharpened the pigment itself on a piece of fine sandpaper, and now I'm pushing the strokes. So you can push or pull, whichever way feels comfortable for you, and as it flicks over that darker area, it is picking up a little bit of the darker pigment, so occasionally I'm wiping that off on the tissue. Now as you can see, as I use pencils, I do turn them in my hand, so I rotate them round in my fingers, and I honestly don't think about it. It's just something I've done, you know, been doing artwork for over 50 years, so it is something that I do, but I don't consciously think about doing. But what it is, I'm turning, when I feel that I'm losing an edge of the pencil, I'm just turning it and working the next sharper edge of the pencil. It helps retain the point of a pencil, whether that's graphite or coloured pencil or pastel pencil. It means you don't have to sharpen them as often, and it gives you finer detailed marks if that's what you want. If you don't want finer detailed marks, if you want to use wider marks, then just let your pencil blunt off. And what you can do, if you're working on a really big piece, or even a small piece actually, and you find your point disappearing, but you don't want to keep sharpening it, then what I suggest is use it while it's sharp on areas where you want finer detail. As it dulls down, move to an area of your painting where you don't need sharper details, where a blunt pencil will suffice. Then work on that area. Once it gets too blunt for that area, then sharpen it and go back to the area where it needs more detail and work like that, and then you won't be having to sharpen your pencil too often. I will do a little snippet video actually about sharpening pastel pencils, because I do get a few people asking about that. And as I said, I don't use a pencil sharpener. I use a knife, a Stanley knife, and a piece of sandpaper, and it's really quick, it's really easy. You don't have to waste anything either, because the pigment that you sand off is water soluble with pastels, so you can actually use them as a paint. I'll cover that in I'll do a little 15-minute video. You could actually do a project just using the pigment that you sand off for paint and then using the pastel for the detail, so I'll do that. Okay, so just as we worked the other areas, we're just working dark to light. Now your darks are already there because I've already applied the base coats. Now I'm back in with the silicone colour shaper. You don't have to use this, I was just playing really in a little world of my own. Actually, I forgot I've got the camera running. So yeah, just blending out a little bit in between the highlighted areas. Don't forget, you can keep going back over until the tooth of your paper is full, and then you could apply a fixative and then apply more layers on top, but I generally don't do that. So we've worked the cheeks now, and we're going up onto the top of the muzzle. This is where you really do need to keep your eye again on the reference image, because on big cats, well, on a lot of mammals actually, the hairs around this area form patterns, they change directions, excuse me, and they're very short. Excuse me, that's my dog barking at the postman. Sky, lay down. Sorry about that. Yeah, the hairs change size and change direction quite a lot around these areas, so do keep that in mind as you're working from your reference images. Some of the hairs also will be facing you, and if hairs are facing the viewer, all you'll see are the tips of the hair, so you can actually dot those in. So don't draw a hairline, don't draw them in as longer hairs if they're not actually there. If you're just seeing the top surface of the hairs, if the hairs are facing you, then just put little dots. So just stipple those in. Yeah, I've got our dog's a lurcher, so she doesn't like the postman. I do believe it's the fluorescent jackets they wear, because she's fine with everybody else. So at least she's made herself know. It's better than snoring. I can think of other noises she could be making that'd be even worse. So barking's not too bad, I guess. Okay, so this is quite self-explanatory working around here. Just keeping my eye on the reference image. Keep referring to it. As I was saying, I don't print any reference images out. I wouldn't be happy with the environmental issues if everybody printed reference images out, the inks and paper. And once you've printed it out and you've done your project, what do you do with it then? Does it go into your recycling bag? Do you keep it forever and not need it? So I do just work from what I see on screen. I download my photographs onto my PC, transfer them over onto my iPad to work from, and that way, another good thing about working from a digital image is that if you need to see more detail, you can just enlarge it on your screen. You don't have to keep printing out different sized reference images of different parts of the subject, so that's another good thing too. Excuse me, all this talking, I need a drink. So we're 45 minutes in, and wow, if anybody's still watching this, thank you, that's amazing. Hope you're all having a good day. So yeah, so here we go, working around different direction again as we go around this part of the muzzle, around the little markings. And I hope you can see now why we did the dark undercoat as well. It saves a lot of time. If I didn't do that, you'd have to be using different coloured pastel pencils to create the surface detail, if you know what I mean. You'd have to be using, you know, the darker greys, darker browns to put the shaded areas in, whereas doing it this way, letting some of that undercoat shine through between the detailed parts you're putting on now, you know, gives the animal form. It's already got the form underneath, but it also adds to the shape and texture on top too. I hope you're seeing that, and I hope I'm describing it okay. If you'd like me to cover any different subjects or different mediums, or a certain subject in a certain medium, just pop it in the comment below, and I'll put it on my to-do list. If you've already subscribed, that's wonderful. Thank you very much for subscribing to my YouTube channel. If you haven't subscribed yet, just please hit the subscribe button. I'd really appreciate that. And if you haven't liked this video and you like what you're seeing, then please hit like too. That's great, thank you. And if at all possible, if you could share my channel with family and friends who might be interested, that would really help my algorithms too. Okay, so just, it really is just a rinse and repeat. Keep doing the same thing. I just didn't want to skip past this because it does give you an insight into how I'm working, so that's why I didn't want to suddenly zip forward to the next part. Okay, little pause there, and I was sharpening my pencil, so not really taking it too sharp. And again, as you can see, I'm turning it round in my hand. And now the hairs are coming towards me, so slightly down and towards me, and very short. They're very short in that area. So keeping that in mind. And no straight lines. There's, you know, animal hair, there's no straight lines, so don't try and do a row of, you know, hairs like, you know, soldiers in a row, because it'll look completely false. So keep the hairs going in the right direction with a slight curve on each hair. Make them nice and random. Random as in, don't try and fill every single space with a hair. So between this clip and the last clip, I removed the glassine paper and I turned the board upside down just because it was more comfortable for me, and work the other side, so they were meeting in the middle. So the middle line running up the middle of the nose, onto the forehead, there's that middle line, and the hairs coming from either side away from the eyes towards the middle, and they peak just in the middle. So I've just done that, and now I'm working up towards the top of the head. So again, the hairs aren't too long in this area, keeping my eye on the reference image. Got a tissue there to wipe off any dark pigment I may pick up because I'm working over a darker area. And yeah, just carrying on. So tiny hairs, all running in the same direction, but not sort of straight. Now it does look like I've put a row in there, but they are different shapes, and I'm scattering them now, working as I come down. So it's hard to explain without actually talking you through it while I'm doing it, because this is something as well. The more artworks you create, I don't actually think about what I'm doing when I'm doing it. I was explaining that to my husband earlier on. When I'm creating these works of art, I'm not thinking about what I'm doing because I've already learnt the techniques. I think the only time I stop and think about what I'm doing is if something goes wrong, you know, if I need to sort of alter what I'm doing, then I'll have a quick think about what I'm doing. But generally things like this snow leopard, it's something that I've done many times before, not this particular project but similar. And so yeah, once you know a technique and you're comfortable with a technique, you can think about something else. So sitting here doing the voiceover for the video, and you can tell I don't do a script. I I can't believe some people write scripts for their YouTube channels. Maybe I should, but oh no, I just like to waffle. Nice and natural. We'll keep it nice and natural. If anybody wants me to write a script, you wouldn't be getting a video every week because it would take me forever. So yeah, what I was saying, yeah, it's something I just don't generally think about too much. Once you know a technique, you know a technique, and then you can bend it to do what you want it to do. Popping in the whiskers, same again, just keep a nice steady hand, making sure they're the right width, they're the right length, and just popping them in, keeping an eye on your reference image. And again, whiskers, if there's a whisker that you don't like the look of on your reference image, don't put it in your painting. You know, if there's a feather out of place on a bird on a reference image, if it's sticking out at an odd angle when all the rest of the plumage is laying flat, don't put it in. Just, you know, a little bit of artistic license. And there we have it. So I thought, you know, lots of people like to see tape being removed. I think it's quite therapeutic. I had a bit of an issue with some of the tape, so I ran a hairdryer over it just to loosen up the tackiness of it. And then these two pieces, the remaining top and bottom, came off okay. So I thought I'd show you that. Some people like it. There you have him. And the acid-free masking tape, you use it once, acid-free washi tape, and you throw it away. So it's not reusable. And there you have him. Snow leopard that I photographed at Twycross Zoo in Warwickshire, 2011 it might have been, actually thinking about it. So if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Please hit like if you've liked this video. Comment in the comments below what you'd like to see me do in the future, what mediums, what subjects. Thank you for watching. If you've stayed till, you know, this far, 53 minutes, wow, you pat on the back, you need a coffee. I need a coffee. Thanks so much. Thank you for all my subscribers. I love you all. You're just amazing. Your comments on social media are wonderful. Yeah, just can't thank you enough. And I strive to take my YouTube channel to the next level this year. So thank you for encouraging me along the way. And see you all in the next video. Take care and bye for now. Bye. Hi there my friends, welcome to my YouTube channel. Oh, first one of 2024. Hope you're all having a good start to the year. Okay, so I'm working on a piece of Clairefontaine pastel matte paper, and I'm using PanPastels to apply the background. I've taped the piece of paper down to a board. I've masked out the area where the deer is going to be. I've just used a piece of Frisket masking film. Popped a little bit of masking tape across the bottom to separate the snowy foreground from the background, just to keep it a little bit clean while I work on the background there. And I'm actually using a makeup sponge to apply the background layers. So for those of you who don't know what PanPastel is, it's a pastel in like a little compact, like you'd find makeup in, and they're quite expensive, but you do get a lot of pigment and they seem to go on forever. I've only ever had to replace the white, and I've been using them for maybe 6-7 years, probably even longer. So they really do go a long way. So I've just applied some dark purples. I do apply some dark blues later on, but I'm just building up like a foundation coat, so to speak, just getting a lot of pigment on there, and then it will all be blended in, and you'll see this in process. There's plenty more videos on my channel where I go through processes like this with the PanPastel, but I just find using PanPastel on large areas just makes the whole process a lot quicker. You can get a nice flat layer, nice even layer I should say, of pastel pigment onto the paper in a short amount of time. And I think we all need that, don't we, when we sit down to work on a a bigger project, it's nice just to get some areas just filled in, sorted, out of the way, and then we can concentrate on the parts of the painting where we need to add more detail, and you're saving yourself time, and that extra time can be applied to other areas of the painting. Okay, so this is sped up. I think I sped it up by 400%, so it's sped up sort of that amount of time. So it does take a while, but not a lot of time. I think I've completed the background in around about an hour ish. So that doesn't take into account me stopping to sip my coffee and things like that. So but I'm working with a selected a selected few pans. So I think I used 4 or 5 colours just for the background. There was a dark purple, a dark blue, sort of a deep rose colour, a light lilac, and a peachy tone. So there might have been 6 colours I was working with. But you can go backwards and forwards, and because of using a soft sponge, I'm actually pushing the pigments right into the tooth of the paper, and that way you can apply more because you're freeing up the surface tooth of the paper. So the YouTube channel has been going really well and finally monetized. I think I've earned £6 up to now, which is great, but it's all it's early days, isn't it? So your likes and subscribes and things like that are truly appreciated. And if you have any questions in particular, please feel free to pop them in the comments below, and I will get back to you as soon as I can. I do reply to all comments, and I do read them all as well. So it's a sort of rinse and repeat, keep going over the layers I've already built up, just building up the intensity of the pigment. Obviously this paper is light grey in colour, and I want to lose that light grey colour. I have tried going on to white pastel matte paper before, but I just don't like the harshness of the white, especially when working with wildlife images. So I do like to use a neutral toned paper, so either the light grey, actually the light blue works really well as well, but it's more of a muted blue, it's a greyish blue, but this is just the light grey. You can get it in all different colours. The Clairefontaine pastel matte paper does what it says. It is made for the application of pastel, but you can use other mediums on it. You can even use wet mediums on it. It does take gouache, it does take watercolour to some extent. I haven't tried acrylics on it, but it just seems to take everything else. It's really, really useful paper to have in the studio. You can also buy the Clairefontaine pastel matte board, which is a lot thicker but obviously more expensive, but this pastel matte paper is thick enough and it does the job. Okay, so having put down as much background flat layers as I wanted and thought I needed for the nighttime sky, I then set about putting these rays of a setting sun in, coming from the bottom up, and then just blending them out as I go. You don't want it to be too streaky. Okay, keep turning the board around. Those of you that know me a long time probably remember that I had a lot of problems with the rotator cuff muscles in my shoulder, so I do tend to rotate the board a bit just to make it more comfortable for me, because I don't ever want that back again. Now my shoulder seems to be 100% mended. Okay, I've got some gouache, so that's opaque watercolour, quite thick, using a toothbrush, and I'm just going to flick some stars into the background just like that, nice and random, and when I feel I've got enough on, that's the background done. You can always go in and slightly alter the background, but once you start adding a mixed medium like the gouache, then it's best to leave it well alone. So when you feel as though you're coming towards a completed part of the painting and you do want to add another medium such as gouache, you're better to take a little break, get a coffee or a tea, walk away for a while, come back, have another look, just to make sure you're happy with how the background looks or with how any aspect of your painting looks, before you then decide to go in with a mixed medium. So gouache, for example, or even coloured pencil, things like that. Okay, so I've removed the Frisk masking film off the deer. I've sketched in the details on the deer now with a very light grey pastel pencil. It's very early in the morning, I'm filming this, recording this voiceover. And now I'm going to set about putting some base layers in. So the two types of pastel pencil that I'll be using for this particular piece are the Cretacolor pastel pencils and the Faber-Castell Pitt pastel pencils. And I just use those for the majority of this piece. So just building up some lights and some darks, trying to find the form in the animal. Don't want it looking flat. From a distance, I guess the ears can look pretty flat, but when you get up close, there's a lot of movement in the ears, lots of shadows, lots of lights. And I'm resting my hand on a mole stick. What that is, it's just a long pole with a big clump of felt or material on one end, and I hook that over the top of the board, and then I hold the other end of the mole stick in my left hand, so I can then rest my right hand on the stick and not on the artwork. Later on, I put the mole stick to one side and I bring out a piece of glassine paper to rest my hand on. And what that is, I think it used to be known as butcher's paper, and it's a non-transferable paper, meaning it doesn't pick anything up, it doesn't smudge anything, so I can rest that against my artwork, rest my hand on that to work. And you can use both the mole stick and glassine with any artworks, oils, acrylics, watercolours, anything you like, and it just keeps your artwork nice and clean. And it keeps your hands clean as well. And obviously we don't want hand oils, you know, the natural oils from your skin going on your artwork, so it is nice just to keep your hand away from the artwork if possible. So just building up different tones and different hues, and because this is the starting point of the animal itself, I am just playing with a few colours at the minute. So I've not not really decided that these are the colours I'm going to use throughout the animal itself. I'm just playing with colours at the moment. If a colour doesn't work, I put it back down and pick up another colour. A lot of especially beginner artists always want to know, well, which colours did I use, which brands. Well, that's understandable, because it is nice to let people know which brands of materials I'm using. But when they start saying which colours, it doesn't really matter as much as the contrast in a piece. So if I pick up a brown and try it and I don't like it, I'll just put it down and pick up another brown. If I'm looking for a reddish brown, I might have 4, 5, 6, 7 reddish browns next to me, and I'll choose the one obviously that I think is going to work the best. But when I do pick that one up and try it, if that doesn't work, I just put it down and pick up another one. It's really that simple. So it would take me a long time if I was to write a list of every colour that I used, and it would be useless really, because some of them might be just used once, just for a very small area, and then not used again, and some of them might be used on the majority of the piece. So it's all about having a play with your materials, and if something's working for you, put it to one side. So when I'm using my pencils, I use them straight out of the tins. I'm fortunate that I do have the full sets that have been sent to me, so so I'd take them out of the tins. If I use them and don't like them, I put them back in the tin. If I use it and I want to carry on using it, I put it to one side in a little tray excuse me, just so that I never lose the colour I'm working with. Because when you start to work with a colour you really want and you really like, then it's just best to keep it to one side. Okay, so I'm just applying some lights now, so just defining some shapes on the face. Didn't want to put these shapes in with the initial sketch because because they're light areas, I didn't want any dark lines showing through the pastel. So pastel may look very opaque, but in actual fact they are quite translucent, which is nice for one thing. You can glaze with them, but on the other hand you can sometimes see dark lines showing through. Now I could have done these sketch lines all in white pastel pencil, which would have been great, that it would have shown up, but it could be easily lost. That's why I chose just a light warm grey, just to get the sketch lines in. The photo that I'm working from is one of my own, and in actual fact it's just a fallow deer in a field, and I'm sort of eye level with it on the photograph. So what I did is, because I wanted in this painting to look like we're actually looking up slightly at the deer, I just changed the proportions slightly and just altered the lighting and shadowed areas slightly, just so you get the effect that you're looking up at the deer and that you're not actually on eye level with the deer. So when people say, and it's normally non-artists that say this, you know, why just replicate a photograph? And the photograph is just a reference, it's just to give you ideas, it's, I mean, obviously to give you correct proportions and things like that. But also, I'm no photographer. I take photographs that are good enough for me to work from, but then there's sort of a line drawn there, because my photographs are nothing like a professional photograph would be. You know, if a professional photographer went out and took photographs of a fallow deer, they'd probably be mind-blowingly beautiful. Mine just catch a pose, they catch the colour. Hopefully most of the time they do catch the intricate details in fur and things like that, but that's all I need. The pose is the main thing for me. And this, the photo I worked from for this, was nothing to write home about. It was really just a bog standard fallow deer in a field with other fallow deer, actually in Devon, North Devon. So moving on. So, and also, you know, when you're painting, you might see a photograph that you've taken or someone else has taken, and it can spark inspiration. And when I first was going through these photographs I'd taken, sorry, this photograph was taken in Norfolk, not Devon. I don't know where I got Devon from. Yeah, Norfolk. When I was going through these photographs of the fallow deer, this fallow deer just caught my eye, and I don't know why I imagined it standing in a situation that I've reproduced in this painting, but something inside me just said this would look great with a purple background set in sun and snow. So I did it. You know, there's the only thing that's holding you back is your imagination and obviously time, but this is a dry medium. This is a perfect medium if you're just starting into art, or if you're limited for time, because you can do a little bit with a dry medium. Coloured pencils take a long time, but again, dry medium. Pastels, perfect. Graphite or charcoal, though charcoal can be a bit messy. But a dry medium, if you're limited on time, you can do a bit and then walk away and come back and do a bit more and walk away. Whereas with mediums such as oils or acrylics or watercolours, you've really got to know how long you can spend in your studio or at your art desk, wherever you work, because the worst thing is to start a watercolour wash, for instance, and run out of time, because you have got to see that process through, so to speak, to get the finish that you're after. Whereas a dry medium, I could stop just here and I could leave it for a week if need be, come back and I can just carry on, and nothing's spoilt, and you're not waiting for drying times and things like that. And the colours are all at hand. Saying that, if you've got a nice large selection of pencils or soft pastels, I would still suggest you start with a limited palette if you're a beginner, because say you have a full set of pastel pencils or coloured pencils, it can be daunting if you're a beginner, because you might get the feeling that, okay, I've got 120 colours in this tin, they're all there in front of me, all these beautiful colours, So maybe I should be using them all, but if you use them all in one painting, it will look artificial, I guess, unless that's something you're going for, that's the look you're going for. But if you're going for reality, which I like to think my paintings resemble reality somewhat, then it's a limited palette. And also you can mix colours. As I said, you know, pastel pencils, any pastel products, they're not as opaque as you may think they are. So you can glaze, which means putting down a lighter colour, maybe a cream or just an off-white, and then going over it with another colour. And it won't completely cover up that light colour. If you're very light-handed, it will tint it, and that's what glazing is. Just altering a layer underneath with a different colour or hue on top. So I'm using a blending stump there just to blend down the pigments into the tooth of the paper. As I said when we were doing the background, the more you push on the pigment, the further into the tooth of the paper it goes, and it just frees up the surface tooth of the paper. This paper, the Clairefontaine pastel matte paper, feels like cork. If you touch the surface of it, it feels like cork, and it feels as though it hasn't got a lot of tooth, but it has. It's got plenty of tooth. I've never ran out of tooth with Clairefontaine pastel matte paper, and so much so that it's the only paper that I now use for pastel works. I used to use velour and other different pastel papers by different manufacturers, but I've always come back to this Clairefontaine pastel matte. So it's the one I stick with, and when I'm teaching in person, it's the one I encourage students to purchase too. A little bit on the pricey side again, but if you're going to spend, say you're a beginner and you're going to spend, a month maybe on a painting, that's a lot of time invested into a piece of artwork. So why not just invest a few pounds more into decent quality paper too? And the results are so different. You can use the same techniques on a cheaper piece of pastel paper as you would on this, and you will just see a huge difference. The layering capabilities alone are amazing on this paper, and you won't get that on a cheaper paper because you'll run out of tooth and you won't be able to apply so many layers. Also, I don't know what it is about this paper, but it does give the pastels the ability to retain their colour. It's quite strange. Other pastel papers, some of the colours end up looking muted, even if you put them down on their own without another colour with them. They just seem to dull down a little bit, whereas the pastel onto Clairefontaine pastel matte paper, the colours keep their colour. Yeah, they keep their, and if they're quite luminous colour, they keep their luminosity too. So it's brilliant. Anyway, back to the deer. So just messing around now. So like I said, the pose is just about the same as the reference photograph. Everything else is out of my head. So I now know by looking at the background that I've got this light source coming up from behind the snowbank, and I need to get some lights in to the deer to reflect where that light source was coming from. In the reference photo, the light source was pretty much, it was midday, so it's pretty much overhead, so the back of the deer was lit up more so than on this painting. So I needed to switch my shadows and my lights round to just so the deer actually looks like it's standing where it is on this snowbank. So I put some darks into that neck area, and it's just sort of the wrinkles of the skin as the deer's turning his head round, her head round, just those wrinkles in the skin, just depicting that added movement, I guess, into the painting. The things I had to alter in the drawing of the deer were very slight, and just elongated the legs and pushed the hip the area where the hip is just a little bit further up, and tilted the head slightly as well, just so the proportions are correct from viewing at an angle where you're below the deer, that's all. If I repeat myself, I'm sorry, I've only had one coffee this morning. It's probably not enough when I'm doing an early morning voiceover. So just adding some highlights down there. Now I've left a highlight running down the back of the neck at the moment, but if you look at the finished painting, I go in and I cover that up. I take that really dark because I thought that was going to work because I've got a highlight running around the ears, but when I looked at it later on I didn't like it, so I went in and covered that up. The beauty of art. Nothing you do can't be fixed. It's don't be frightened of having a go at something, because we're all learning. I'm 58 this year, and I've been painting and drawing things since I was 4 apparently, and it's just a never-ending learning curve. It's a journey, we're all on it. If you're a creator, you know, if you've only done one painting, you're a creator, you're an artist, you've started your journey. And just know that we're all on the same journey. We might be at different stages along the journey, but we're all on the same journey, and it's a constant learning curve. And people are frightened, you know, beginners are sometimes frightened of making a mistake, but that's part of learning, you know. If a toddler never fell over, they'd never learn to walk, would they? So it's just a learning curve. And the more mistakes you make now, the less mistakes you'll make in the future. And also, if in the future you're doing a painting and maybe you're 3/4 of the way through and it's going so well, you're so pleased with it, and then you make a mistake, if you haven't made that mistake in the past, or a mistake that is similar to that, you won't know how to fix it. So make your mistakes now. Just think of it as part of your learning curve. Teach yourself how to amend that mistake and move on. It's as simple as that. In actual fact, it is the word mistake. Maybe it's, don't think of it as the word mistake. Just think, oh, wish I hadn't have done that. Right, let's rectify it. And once you've rectified it, move on. And if you want to keep a little notepad with problematic things that you've solved, you know, that's fine. And then you can look back at that if it happens again in the future, which no doubt, talking from experience, they do. You know, even though you've made a mistake in the past and you hope you've learned from it, sometimes these things can just reoccur. Maybe you're thinking about your shopping list and you do something wrong in your painting, but these things happen. We're all human, you know. Life's a blessing, and, you know, live life. It's not a spectator's sport. We're only here once, so enjoy yourself. Get creating, get the paints out and the pencils out, and encourage other people to have a go too. Right, okay, so I've moved away from the neck area now. I won't say I get bored, because I don't really get bored, but my mind gets a little bit fidgety and I want to work somewhere else on a piece. And it's quite difficult because when I'm filming for YouTube, it's different if I'm teaching in person, because I will be quite, you know, step 1 you do this, step 2 you do this, step 3 you do this. But when I'm working in the studio like this and I've just got the video camera running, I do want to flit about, especially as a painting starts coming together, because I want to keep a balance running throughout the painting. And so I might be wanting to darken a certain area, and then I'll go to another area of the painting and darken that too, just to keep a balance, adding lights in one area, but then I'll want to add lights in another part of the painting to keep that balance going, just so the painting ends up building up as one and not as little separate pieces. So I worked on the head, as you saw, and down to the neck, and then I just wanted to work on the back end of the deer then. So it means I've not got a pause button on my video camera, so it meant stopping the video camera, repositioning it, zooming back in, switching it on. It does. Oh, am I moaning about something tiny? But when I just want to flit about on a painting, I've got to think, right, I need to adjust the camera as well. yeah, I'm not really moaning, I'm just sort of stating a fact, that's all. But I do, what I was getting at is I do flit around on a painting. So if you suddenly see the camera angle change, that's probably what I'm doing. I'm just working on another area, even if it's just slightly to one side of where I'm working at the moment. So little tiny details. So on the leg, wanted to get those darks in first. And throughout painting, I'm always wanting to work from the back of a painting to the front of a painting. So if it was something simple like a sky, a tree, and then a grass in the front area, I'd do the sky, the tree, and then the grass. So with this, I'm working the background first, so got that in first, and then I'll do the subject. Now the reason I do it that way round is because I want the subject to be sitting on top of the background. If I do it the other way round, so if I was to get this plain piece of paper, sketch the deer on, and then go in and do the deer, doing the background is possible afterwards, but it's more tricky because as I bring the colours up towards the deer, I've got to be so careful that the background doesn't overlap the deer. So being careful, and I've seen it, especially in beginner artists, they'll do a subject, so they'll draw a tiger, for instance, or paint a tiger. They'll want to put a background in as an afterthought. And then because they're being so careful not to let the background overlap the subject ends up with like a halo effect around it. This is something that I really, really advise people to avoid if possible. So this is why I do the background first, preferably with my subject masked out. Then I can be as messy as I want in the background, knowing that the subject area is going to be nice and clean when I remove the mask. You don't have to, use a mask in. I could put the background in first on this piece without a mask, but again, I'd have to be so careful. The background would have been applied a lot slower because I'd be coming up towards the deer's legs and things like that, and little tiny areas where I'd have to be very, very careful. It can be done, but just for ease of practice, I guess, and saving time, I do like to mask out areas. Working on this paper, I've found that the best way to mask out an area is just with a piece of Frisket, and all it is, it's a sticky back paper, really. It is acid free, it is made for artists, photographers and things like that, and it peels off and doesn't leave a residue. If you're working in watercolour, then you can use either this Frisket as well, but you've got to be careful with some papers. If your paper's very rough, then the paint can seep under the edges of the Frisket tape or Frisket film. You can use masking fluid. I've not tried masking fluid on this paper. I don't see the need, but maybe you could. You'd have to try it on a little tiny scrap piece of paper. But masking fluid can definitely be used on watercolour paper, and just trial it. If it's a new piece of paper by a brand you've never heard of, do try a little bit of masking fluid on it first before going on to a whole sheet of paper where you're going to be working your project. And if you want to learn more about watercolours and using Friskets and masking fluids and things like that, there's plenty of videos on my YouTube channel to take a look at. Okay, back to this project. I'm off on a tangent, so back to this project. So I've applied the darks, put some detailing on. When you're working with hairs or fur or even feathers or scales, always watch the direction. Look at your reference image. If your reference image doesn't show you something that you need, don't put it in. If you do really need to put it in and it isn't on your reference image, look at other reference images just to get that in your head. Which way does the fur go, or which way do the feathers go on that part of the anatomy of the chosen subject? Sounds simple, doesn't it? But so many beginners will just go in and put fur wherever, and just because the fur direction and texture looks good in one area doesn't mean that that's going to look correct all over the subject. So when you, let's for instance look at fur. When we're creating fur on a subject, look for the direction of the fur obviously, but the fur length as well, because it changes throughout the body of your subject. It will change. It'll be long in some areas and it'll be a lot shorter in other areas, so just keep that in mind too. Okay, working up onto the rump. So I know the light's coming in from the sort of midsection on the right, so this needs to go a bit darker. I did get all this area in, and I did go back later and glaze over it and make it quite a bit darker. So, but I start off going in with some mid-tones and then going in with some darks just to get those markings in. Now that's nice about working, especially if you've got a limited palette, which I do suggest beginners work with to begin with, is work with a toned paper, so you get that mid-tone already there for you. Then you can go lighter and you can go darker. If you work with a white paper, a problem that you can come across is you can't get any whiter than white. And if you work with black paper, you can't get any darker than black. So if you work with a mid-tone, you can go lighter and darker, and that just helps. It's like when you're mixing paints on a palette. A lot of artists use white palettes, but if I'm mixing oils or acrylics, I like to use a grey palette because the mid-tone's already there and I can see how my colours are mixing lighter and darker. And I think the same applies in my head anyway when working on a mid-tone paper. This is light grey paper. It's a neutral colour, which is great as well. And it just gives me that mid-tone, probably a little bit of a lighter mid-tone, but it still works as a mid-tone. So building up the darker areas there. And as I said at the beginning, I'm working with the Faber-Castell Pastel pencils and Cretacolor, however you pronounce it, pastel pencils. They've both got very similar softness. So there's a wide range of pastel pencils out there. The softest probably I've ever worked with are Caran d'Ache, and the hardest ones are probably the Faber-Castell pastel pencils, and then everything lays somewhere in between those two brands. And it's what you get used to. If I'm working on a bigger project where the subject is a lot bigger, I'll go for the softer pastel pencils such as the Caran d'Ache or the Derwent. If I'm going, the smaller I go, then the harder I want that pastel lead to be, because I don't want it to keep breaking and I want to be able to keep a sharp point on it too. I don't know if you saw there, I just wiped the pastel pencil off onto a piece of tissue. When you take a light colour over a darker colour, inevitably the pastel pigment will pick up some of the darker colour. So you just need to keep that wiped off in between each application, just so it doesn't transfer the darker colours to somewhere where you don't want it to be. And going back in with the blender stump. The blender stumps you can get for just a few pounds, £3 or £4 for a pack of maybe 5, and they're ideal just for blending. You can blend pastel, obviously. You can blend charcoal or graphite. Don't sharpen them though. I have seen people attempt to sharpen them and they just end up going all, the tips of them go all fuzzy. So keep a set. If you're going to work with pastels and you're going to work with charcoal and you're going to work with graphite, just keep a separate little set of the blender stumps separate for each medium that you work with. And if one gets dirty, just wipe it off on an old t-shirt or a lint-free rag, and it wipes off most of the pigment, or a scrap piece of paper you can wipe it off on. And you could keep some ends just for the dark shades and some ends just for the light shades. But don't sharpen them. That's not what they're made for. So this piece is quite self-explanatory, isn't it? Just showing where the colours are going and just building up the layers, building up the textures. So what's everybody working on at the moment? New projects, anybody? Or new mediums maybe? Did you have new mediums for Christmas? I've got a few products that I need to review, so hopefully they'll be doing those soon. I know a lot of you have been asking for a studio tour, so I will be working on that soon, but I'm quite busy at the minute, so it's fitting it all in. But some more suggestions from people for videos, so they've gone onto my to-do list. One lady's requested how I go about airbrushing backgrounds when I'm working with acrylics, so I will be doing that because that should be quite a quick little video to produce. It's the editing, oh my word, video editing. God, anybody out there want to do my video editing? Never claimed to be tech savvy, but it's just the time factor. Anyway, I feel blessed to be able to do this, so thank you all for watching, and thank you all for subscribing and liking and commenting. It's really, really appreciated. And I do enjoy it. It's lovely just to be able to share with people. Okay, so adding a little bit of lilac. So if I go down with white, if I just went on with a white pencil just here, it would look very flat. And white is very reflective colour, so it's going to be picking up the colours surrounding it. So whenever I'm working a subject with surroundings such as this, I like to pull some of the colours from the background into the subject. So if there's purple in the background like this, there's going to be purple in the subject. If I was to paint a tiger in a green rainforesty area, for instance, I would pull some of the greens into the big cat coat. Sorry, I meant to say jaguar and I said tiger, but there you go. So yeah, I pull colours from the background and the foreground into the subject itself, and that's the way of making it look like it should be there, and it makes it stop looking like it's been cut and paste, I guess, by integrating colours throughout a painting, not just in one area. Which brings me back to another idea. If you go in with the wrong colour, what do you do? So if, for instance, I was, I don't know, listening to some music and I picked up a bright orange and plopped it into my painting, what do? If I can't remove that colour or successfully cover it up, then I'm going to apply that colour elsewhere in my painting, but on purpose. And the reason being, if I splodge that bright orange in one area and leave it there and carry on with the rest of the painting, it will be noticeable and it will look like a mistake. It will look like what it was. It was a mistake. But if I put that colour elsewhere in a painting and balance the painting out with that colour, it looks like it's been put there on purpose. So that's another thing, it's something we learn as we work through many paintings. These things happen, and it's just finding a way of rectifying it, finding an answer to that problem, and that's one of them. So don't be worried if you put the wrong colour in. Either cover it up if you can't remove it. If you can't do either of those, then put it somewhere else to balance the painting out, and you'll find it works really well and nobody will notice it in the end. Excuse me, have a sip of water. So building up some depth now. Now the same as I was saying with white, you don't just want to put white down where you think you need white. You always want other colours underneath it, sort of light blues, light pinks. The same goes with black. If I was to go on an area, the tail looks black, doesn't it? But if I was just to go on with black, it would look really flat. But by applying colours underneath it, I can vary how the black looks. So if I want a black area on an animal to look cool, if I want a cold looking subject, then I'll put blues, lilacs, purples underneath. If I want a black area to look warm, if I want a subject to look warm, then underneath the black I'll start off with reddish browns, yellow ochres, things like that, and it just alters the way black looks. And obviously the same goes for white. If I want the white to look really cold, I want blues and lilacs underneath it. If I want the white to look warm, then I'll put light yellows, peachy colours, things like that underneath it. And obviously, just because you've put white on doesn't mean you have to stop there. Obviously, if you want to go, if something needs to look white, then you can't get whiter than white. But if you've put white on and it looks too stark, then you can glaze over with another colour, as long as you're using a paper with enough tooth to allow that extra pigment to go on. So just going very carefully round the markings, because I don't want to lose them completely. I could add them on top, but because I've quickly popped them in with a lighter colour pastel, I don't want to lose them now, else that's doubling my work. So yeah, so just playing with some different colours there. Do go over this area a few times, because I go in, I get all the colours in and the amount of detailing I want in there. I stand back with a fresh cup of coffee, have a look. No, it's not how I wanted it. So I do go in a few times, and each time I blend the pastel into the paper with the blending stump, and not start again, but just redefine the colours and redefine the textures. So just a little bit of pressure there, just pushing the pastel, or very light pressure there. But when I go up onto the reddish area there, quite a bit of pressure there, just to push the pigment into the paper, into the tooth of the paper. Little bits of detailing going in, fiddling details, slight camera alteration there. And very gentle hand. So at the moment I'm not pushing at all, I'm just letting the tooth of the paper pick up the pigment from the pencil. Going gently round the areas. This video is running at about 1 hour 10 minutes ish. I know a lot of you have been asking for the longer videos, so this is one of them. I'll try and mix it up. I'll try and mix it up with some longer videos and shorter ones. But if you let me know what you want. If you want longer videos like this, let me know. And if you want short, sped up ones, I can do that too. I don't set myself New Year's resolutions, but set myself a couple of goals this year, and one of them's working out really well, and the other one's had to take a sideline already. So one of them is Fine Art America. So I've had a Fine Art America account for a few years, and I've never had the time really to get to use it. And I've finally uploaded 21 paintings so far onto Fine Art America. And obviously their UK branch is called Pastels, or Pixels. And I'm now able to sell prints and merchandise through there. So hopefully by the end of the year, doing what I did was printed out two little charts of things I wanted to do this year. And one of them was to put a new painting onto Fine Art America every week during 2024. well, I've already put 21 paintings on there, so I'm well ahead of myself there. So hopefully by the end of the year there'll be 52 artworks available as prints and t-shirts and phone cases and things like that. I'll put a link in the description below. The other goal was to release one video a week on YouTube. Yep, that's not happened so far. This is the first one for 2024. So hopefully, I'm hoping that by the end of the year there will be that amount more videos on my channel, and hopefully even more. But I'll need to be catching up with myself. So I have got 2 videos filmed, but because of the company that I was working for at the time, I can't release them yet because the product hasn't been released yet. So so there would have been the right amount of videos so far this year, but I can't release them yet. So hence there might be more than one being released per week later on in the year. So yeah. Building up some darks, textures. There's only so much I can say about this process because it is rinse and repeat. It's exactly the same. Pop your lights in so you don't lose them. Pop your darks in and then start applying the midtones and values in. Then out comes the blender stump and you blend them all together and then apply the detail on top. If there's any subjects that you'd like to see me work on, one lady has asked for a giraffe, so that is something that I'm going to be doing soon. She didn't say what medium, so I'll have a think about that. So, and obviously one lady asked for airbrush background, so that'll be acrylics. I mean, it could be watercolours, but it'll probably be acrylics. So if you've got any mediums that you'd like to see me work with, or any subjects that you'd like to see me cover, or both, you know, if you'd like a certain subject in a certain medium, just let me know. And there you go with the blending stump, and it is slightly blending the colours together, but it's more about pushing that pigment into the tooth of the paper so it frees up the surface tooth for me to apply detail. I went on and applied the detail, I'm assuming the same as the other leg, so it would be like for like. And this is where I start fiddling with the getting that rump high enough, that hip. Remember there's a skeleton underneath all of that, so I had to push that hip a little bit higher because of the viewing angle of the deer. Just so I don't lose those lights, just add in a little bit more. And a little bit of texture. I'm pleased with how the background looks. I think it's pretty, isn't it? I do like that. Just breaking up the surface there with a little bit of texture. And really, it's quite different, isn't it? The texture around the top of the back legs and tail where the hair is quite defined. Thinking that the hair is a lot shorter on this rump area and we'd only be seeing the tips of the fur because of the direction that we're looking at the deer and, you know, the angle that the deer is standing at. And it's just trying to replicate that feel of fur. You don't have to put every hair in. It would be, well, it wouldn't be impossible, but it'd be mind-blowingly hard to do this small with something this small. But it could be done, but it's not needed. And I think when you think about how far away you are when you view your painting, if you stand back and have a good look at it, 9 times out of 10 people stand at roughly 2 1/4 the diagonal when they're viewing a painting. If you stand back 2 1/4 times the diagonal, size of your painting. If you're adding details that can't be seen from that sort of distance, then is there any point in adding them? You're making a lot more work for yourself that's not actually ever seen. Now, I don't know if you noticed then, but when I went on the base coat layer underneath what I'm doing now, I did put it on in the direction that I'm now working on top. And the reason being, when you're putting your base coat layers on, do try to go in the direction that you want the top layers to go, because if you go on with your base coat layers and leave any hard lines, for instance, it's not too bad if they're going in the correct direction, because you can somewhat cover them up with the detailed layers that go on top. So that's something I should have mentioned earlier, and it's just crossed my mind now. Now, blending out some areas with my finger there, and that's just to soften certain areas to make it look like the light's hitting that area in particular. Using some purples and a purpley grey there. Obviously, I said I'm going to be starting introducing some purples into the subject itself. Purples that correspond with the purples that are used in the background. So when I say, if I was going to do, say, a jaguar in a forest, and I want to introduce greens into the jaguar's coat, because there's greens in the background, I would be using the greens that I have already used. I wouldn't go and use a completely different set of greens. And same here, the purples. Obviously, I'm not using the PanPastel purples in the deer's coat, but I am using a corresponding purple out of the pencil collection. So as near as. And when I go over with my finger like that, I'm not blending the pastel down, I'm just softening it slightly. Just softening the look of it. And in with the blender stump, and as you can see, I've used that blender stump on yellow before, but it's not affecting the subject I'm working on now. It's just that the tip of the pencil stump has stained. None of that pigment is being released onto this project because it's been wiped off on a tissue. So yeah, you just use them as they are. Excuse me. Little bit of shaded area there and a camera move. Okay, so as we were saying about using the surrounding colours in our subject, just building up some darker areas now, some shading areas using lilacs. And that one is very lilac-y grey. I've tried to edit the video so the colours are true. That's something I've taught myself over the past couple of weeks. A little bit more video editing, colour correction and things, because obviously I want you to see the colours as they are true to me. That's why it's nice to have the actual finished piece on screen so you can see where I'm aiming for. And when I film, I'm just filming under studio lighting. It's very bright lighting, but it is daylight lighting, but for studios, and it does wash out the video a little bit, and I just have to do a little bit of colour correcting and things like that. And I'm quite chuffed with myself that I've actually taught myself a little bit more video editing already this year. May have to work on the voiceovers though, eh? Okay. A little bit more darkening areas, a little bit of glazing as well, going over the lighter areas too. And just softening. I've gone a little bit too dark to begin with there, so I've softened that as well. And that pencil is sort of a pinky colour. It's very, very pale, but it isn't white. It's a sort of a pinky tone. And obviously pinks work really nice with purples. So onto the coat of the animal. The flank, is it? Just there? The side anyway, side of the animal. and working down into that darker area that I'd already put there. Little tiny dots, a little bit of stippling going on there just to give a feeling of texture. In with the purple again. I should have music playing, shouldn't I? So when I pause, and I've not got a lot to say, at least you can listen to something. And working dark to light and light to dark. You can work both ways with pastel. That's one of the joys of pastel. You can just bend the product, bend the medium to how you want to work or how you prefer to work. And being able to work light to dark and dark to light does help if you do go into an area that you're not too happy with. It's a lot easier to be able to alter an area if you can work both ways. A little bit of glaze in there. I held the pencil on its side so there was very little pressure and just glazed an area, just softened that area down to alter the colour and to alter the values. The value of something is just how light or dark something is. Stippling means just dabbing your pencil up and down, just stippling, just to create texture. So it's not a physical texture, nothing's standing up on the paper or anything like that. It's just a visual texture. And blending it down slightly with the blending stump. So if I put something on and I don't like it, before I try to cover it up or go over it, I just blend it down, push it down into the tooth of the paper. And obviously, as I said earlier in the video, you've got to be working with a paper that has a decent amount of tooth to be able to do that. If you're working with a paper that has just a very shallow tooth, then that pigment is just going to lay about on the surface of the paper, and when you try to work over it, it'll just sort of reactivate it because it will always be there. Stippling again. And even though these are dots and dashes, when the lines are a little bit larger, they do need to be going in the correct direction. So working down this leg now, you can see the hind legs are all done. If I did want to go in and alter them, that's fine. But for now, I feel as though I've done enough on them to move on, and I'd obviously done enough on the body to move on as well. Getting the darks in first. You can get the lights in first, or you can get the darks in first, whichever you feel easier. Once you've the lights in and the darks in, and you've got the part of the subject is taking the correct form, then you can move on to blending the areas together where they need to blend, and then putting the details on top. Obviously, if you put all your lights in and then all your darks in, and then you blend and blend and blend and blend, you'll just lose the lights and the darks because everything will end up blending together. I see a lot of people do that in acrylics and oils, that they get a light next to a dark and they blend to get the mid-tone, but they carry on blending and then they lose the contrast and it all becomes one mid-tone. So you do want to avoid over blending, but you do want to blend so that there is a mid-tone between the lights and the darks, even if it's just a tiny blend. It just helps if it's there. So pushing that pigment into the paper, nice and dark. And when I'm blending, I am going in the direction that I want the detail to go, the detail that goes on top. And this is a nice vibrant pink. So this pink is sort of in keeping with the area of the background that's adjacent to the leg of the deer. and just building up the detail, watching my reference image quite closely here, just I want to make sure that the hairs do actually go that way on a deer's leg. They did on this deer's leg. Now I'm building up the lights. So the legs were worked exactly, the front legs I should say worked exactly the same as the hind legs, and the reason I stopped there is it was just a rinse and repeat, so it's going to be a long video already and it would have ran on and for around 2 hours if I'd have filmed both the front legs as well as both the back legs. So sorry there, going behind the reference image, but I think you'd rather have the reference image there and be able to see the rest of the foreground going in. So I'm not using the makeup applicator this time, I'm using actually one of the soft sponges, and there's the selection of colours, well some of them that I'm working with. There are a couple more in that palette that haven't been used, but using the colours that I used in the sky plus white. So I'm now using white as well. So you might think, oh, snow will just pop on some white, but believe me, if you just put white on, it looks so flat and it doesn't look like snow. This is just I wouldn't say the foreground looks realistic, but you're in your head, you know, your brain decides, yep, that's snow, that's just the deer is standing on snow. So I want to just introduce some of the colours that are in the sky and white, and that's all I'm doing, and I'm just making this up out of my head, having a play, experimenting. If it goes wrong, you can lift a certain amount off with a piece of masking tape. If there's something that you've gone on really thickly and you don't want it there anymore, use masking tape, or you can get your hoover out and a soft bristle brush, and preferably wear a mask if you're going to do this, and you can brush the pastel out of the paper into the hoover nozzle. Done that before, but yeah, it's not recommended, especially if you've got if you're in an enclosed area, or you've got things like asthma and things like that. Wouldn't recommend doing that because the pastel particles can go into the air. But yes, just play and have fun. I was really enjoying this, and I just wanted to get a nice flowing feeling to the snowbank with the colours that I'd already used. Yeah, so I just went for it. So it's just a case of I just popped some colours in where I felt I needed them, some shadow colours in, some highlights in, and yeah, it's really self-explanatory for this foreground. There wasn't a plan as such, I just knew I wanted it moving in this direction, and that was it really. Now if I'd have had it moving it, yeah, that's the point. If you look at the bottom of if you look at the snowbank in the finished painting, if I was to switch that round so that the snow was going from the top left to the bottom right, I think it would be too similar to the background direction. So I wanted it to be the same direction as the deer. So moving, you know, you got the back of the deer, the rump of the deer to the left and the head to the right, and I wanted the snow to go in that direction as well, from left to right. That was the only planning I had for the foreground, is that I wanted it going in that direction and not the same direction as the background. Does that make sense? I hope so. So the soft tool that you can see me using here it's spelled SOFFT, Soft Tools, and I believe they're made by the same company, PanPastel. They do tools that look like palette knives as well, with little foam socks on the ends that are removable, and you can see me using those in other pastel videos, especially the one of the polar bear. You can see me working a big background in with these soft pan tools, but I will link everything in the description below. This foreground took less time than the background. I think this foreground took about half an hour, that's all. Half an hour, 40 minutes at the most, just to get a foreground in, sorry. Really enjoyable, very relaxing. I don't know if I had some music playing now or a podcast or something on. I think it might have been a podcast, I can't remember. But just relaxed, just taking my time, not rushing. Obviously when you get to this part of a painting, you do want it to be finished, because I'm constantly thinking about the painting that I'm going to be working on next. But that doesn't mean to say that I should rush anything. So I'm still taking my time and feeling relaxed and in the zone. And if I'm not, then I need to stop. Because the worst thing now would be to do something that I regret on a painting that is nearly finished. Obviously, as I was saying, you can rectify things, but it's so much easier not to make those misjudgments and have to rectify them. You know, just keep a steady hand and a sane mind and be relaxed and just work through every part of a painting as though, you know, it's the main area, really. Because it saddens me when I see people do drawings and paintings and you can really see which part of the painting they enjoyed and which part of the painting they didn't enjoy. Because every part of a painting has its own story, and every part of a painting is there for a reason. You know, it's part of telling that story. This snow, the drifting snow and the colours in the snow, textures in the snow, they're all as important as the deer. Even though there wasn't as much thought process, I didn't have to do as much planning as I did with the deer, obviously because I changed so much of the deer from the reference image. But it's still as important as the deer. I hope that makes sense. So we're coming towards the completion of this piece anyway. If you're still here with me, thank you so much for staying with me for just over an hour, about an hour and 9 minutes so far. There's only a few more minutes left and then you'll be able to see me finish the piece. Working this foreground, I did work, as you hope you've noticed, light to dark and dark to light. Just flicking up areas of that white. I don't know why that went out of focus then. Flicking areas of the white up into the more shaded areas. Just softening some areas, adding little highlights. I think my lighting's altered, hasn't it? That's probably why it went out of focus a little bit, but just building up that texture so none of it looks flat. Just with the movement, I wanted to keep some movement in the foreground, and the movement draws your eye up from the bottom left. If you're looking at the finished painting, you know, your eye can be drawn up from the bottom left up to the ridge of the snow and then up to the deer's face, and then your eyes have got somewhere to rest. In a painting, it is nice if you think of a composition, where will my eyes rest when I'm looking at painting? So something needs to draw your eyes into a painting. And there you have him. Thank you so much for staying with me this past hour and 10 minutes. Feels like a year probably if you're listening. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already, and until next time, stay safe and stay creative. Bye for now. Bye bye.